this is a 2006 Case 430 Series 1 skid steer loader. That really doesn't matter because this procedure is going to be virtually identical on virtually every skid steer ever made, with the major exception of anything made by Bobcat. They use a totally different frame design, and the wheel bearings are mounted different, and they have different replacement procedures. But anyway, virtually everything else, you'll have a frame, you'll have this axle shaft housing here, this big metal thing, and then you'll have the axle shaft that runs through it. And the problem is, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's got some slop in it, and it's not supposed to have any. And you probably won't notice this while you're running it, but if you pay close attention, you should notice oil that leaks out of the seal in the axle shaft housing and kind of runs down and gets all inside the wheel. That's pretty easy to miss too, but that's a telltale sign of a bad wheel bearing. Other things can wipe that seal out too, like if you get baling twine wrapped around it or something like that. But if you see oil on the inside of your wheel, check it out. So as you can see, I've already taken the wheel off. The next thing we need to do is take out, I think there's 8 bolts around the axle shaft housing here. So let me pop those out. Okay, so actually what you have to do is, let me see if I can show you. So this won't just come out after you take the bolts out. What you have to do is there is a nut on the end of the axle shaft inside the chain case that holds that big sprocket on. And maybe you can kind of see the socket I've got on the nut on the end there. So you have to get down in here. I just unbolted where some wires are bolted on, like the starter wire and a ground wire, and just push them out of the way. And you take out this little plastic plug here. It just pops into a hole in the frame back here. So you pry that out, and then you can just stick a socket on that nut and take the nut off, and then the sprocket will slide off and allow you to slide the whole axle shaft and housing out as one piece. Alright, so now this should just pull right out, I think. Awesome. That was way overkill for what I needed there, but that's okay. There we go. It's not great. Got the parts cleaned up. The inside bearing here looks fine. Hopefully you can see that. Don't look like there's anything wrong with it, but the outer bearing is pretty bad. It doesn't really look worn out. It just looks like it got contaminated with water and mud and ruined that way. So I don't know if maybe like the seal went out and let water in and that ruined the bearing, or if the bearing wore down and let the shaft wobble around and take out the seal, and then that that ruined the bearing. But whatever, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. You can see the shaft here. Hopefully you can see that. It's kind of corroded and like pitted, and it's got a rough surface right where the seal rides. So I can do something about that. Hopefully I can just get a like a speedy sleeve thing in that size. If you need to get a bearing race out of a blind hole like this, a really easy way to do it is just get your welder and set it up nice and hot and weld a bead all the way around the inside of the race, and as the weld cools it will contract and actually shrink the race just enough to where it'll just about fall out or come out real easy anyway. So I'm going to do that now. There we go. I was hoping I could do that without ruining this plastic spacer thing in here, but it wasn't quite that slick. Oh well, to get a new one of those. Got the new parts here, so we just need to be careful and make sure assemble it correctly. I think just like that is fine. It just sits down in a little recess in there. Looks fine. What I like to do is take the old race and use that to knock in the new one. Should be. Yep. The inside bearing gets lubricated by oil that drips off the chain as it goes around, but the outside bearing does not. It is lubricated by grease, so we need to pack it, and that's really easy. Get a palm full of grease. That's probably enough. Just take your bearing like that and just kind of slap it into the grease until there we go. You can see grease coming out between like the rollers and the race there, and then you just do that all the way around and the bearing's packed, and that just makes sure that it's full of grease when you put it into service. So that looks good. Got grease all through it, and I'm just going to take some extra and just smear it around the inside of where this bearing is going to ride. too much actually. So now we can put the seal in, and that's just like putting the race in. You just tap it in. I like to keep old bearing races around for when you need to do stuff like this. I mean, you could go get like a seal driver set, but where's the fun in that? So you want to just drive that in until it's flush with the housing, and this actually worked out great because this race was just the right size to where it overlapped both the seal and the housing, so I just drove it down until it wouldn't go anymore. It's perfect. Before we can put the axle shaft in, I need to install this. I call it a speedy sleeve. I think they go by different names, like ready sleeve and a few others. I'm not sure what they're actually called, but it's just like a little thin piece of stainless steel that you kind of just hammer on there, and it covers up the old torn up sealing surface and gives the seal a nice smooth place to ride. Now, I've never used one of these before, but I've heard it's a good practice to smear some like silicone sealant around the inside of it before you put it on to make sure that it seals well to the shaft. It's supposed to seal anyway, but just as a precaution. So I'm going to do that, and then I think we should be able to just drive it on there. All right. Carefully lower this onto here. The sleeve kit comes with like this driver, and it has normally it's like that. It has a cap over it, so I just carefully cut that off so it would fit down over the shaft, because obviously that's not long enough. I think this is meant for it's meant for a shorter shaft. And then I put that on there, and then I had this piece of PVC pipe with a bell on one end that was just the right size to match up with that, and just gently drove it on there. And when you're doing stuff like this, you just got to get creative with it. There's no textbook way to push a shaft on a sleeve on a shaft like that, or a bearing or whatever. So you just got to figure it out, basically. I looked at the service manual, and it actually says to press the bearing on via the housing. So I've got it set up in the press here. That seemed like kind of a bad idea to me, because it's like you're pressing the rollers against the races, but that's what the service manual says do, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so that's going. Oh yeah, okay. It's on, and then should... Yeah, all right. Felt good. The inner bearing looked fine, so I'm just going to reuse it. Got this big O-ring in here that seals the axle housing to the frame of the machine. just need to stick the bolt and washer here on the inside to bolt the sprocket onto the axle shaft. I need to set the chain tension before I tighten the axle housing bolts down, and that's done by sliding the axle housing back and forth. And so what I've done is just wedged a high lift jack in here, and I'm using it to push the axle housings apart. Well, only this one's moving, of course, because this one's still tightened down. But now you don't want it like as tight as you can get it. You just want it. The manual calls for a 1/2 inch of play in the chain up and down, I think is what it says. Feels pretty good. Maybe a little tighter. Yeah, that's good. That's just kind of a do it by feel kind of thing. And then tighten the bolt down here. And then get another one over here. Now I'm going to change the oil in the chain case. There is a little plug up under, yeah, right there, that I need to take out, but it's all kind of smoothed over from people hitting stuff, so I'll have to figure that out. Success. I put a new plug in the drain hole. I've got it jacked up on this side so these tires can roll. And what I'm going to do is pour like 2 or 3 gallons of gasoline into the chain case, and then run this side around a bit and wash out what's left in there. That should be good. Now we can drain out the gas. Alright, so all I need to do is put the new oil in it and it's ready to roll. Something I wanted to mention is that these don't take very much oil at all. It seems like some people think you need to fill up the whole chain case with oil, and that's definitely not the case. All you need is, on this particular machine, in fact, it only takes 1.5 gallons, but normally you just need enough oil to until it runs out this fill hole on the bottom here, which is, as you can see, is like right near the bottom of the case. Because you really only need enough oil to where the chains will just drag through it and drip it on the bearings and sprockets and everything as they go around. So yeah, you don't need to fill it up. And the other thing is, it really doesn't matter what kind of oil you use. The manual for this machine calls for 10W30 motor oil, and I am sure that's just because it's the same oil that is used in the hydraulic system. You can put whatever you want in there as long as it's kind of viscous and kind of wet. If you want to use, tractor hydraulic fluid, motor oil, automatic transmission fluid, whatever, it really does not matter. And in fact, I'm going to reuse old oil that I took out of the hydraulic system the last time I changed the hydraulic oil in this machine. And yeah, that's fine. But that's it. I hope this helps you. It's kind of difficult to film as much detail as I really would have liked to, but hopefully you get the gist of it anyway. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment and I'll try to answer it. Thanks for watching.